Coach, thanks for joining us today. We're going to take questions for about 20 minutes. Media, if you can please use the raise your hand feature or message me when you have a question. We'll call on you guys for questions. So whoever wants to get started, please use that raise your hand feature and we'll call on you guys to answer. Questions. Christian de Guzman, we'll go for you first.
Hey, Coach, how you doing today?
Good, Christian. How are you?
Good. So, what have you been preparing for at UNC, especially with their receivers? That receiver duo is a really good tandem, one of the best in the ACC. How do you expect your secondary to face up against them?
You know, it is a good tandem. They have an inside guy, they have an outside guy, they have a guy. Both of them can go deep, but they have one guy they like to go deep to, another guy they like to run more inside. It's a very good combination, obviously, with that quarterback and the 4 out of 5 experienced offensive line coming back. It's a very, very difficult task. You know, you have the 2 running backs combined or 1,900 yards, almost 2 1,000-yard rushers in the same backfield. So now you're in a situation where you've got to stop the run, and a lot of times those guys get the coverages out there that they need. You know, their offense is a lot like ours. They run a lot of RPOs. They try to take their shots deep and mix it up. So it's going to be a difficult situation. There's no doubt about it. When you have the ability to run and throw the football, there's going to have to be times where those guys are isolated, and our DBs are going to have an opportunity to make plays, and their receivers are going to have an opportunity to make plays. I don't know how you can do it any other way when an offense is two-dimensional.
How much of a litmus test or a barometer do you think this can be to really get a gauge on how well your defense has shifted to the 3-3-5?
You know, I don't think it's going to be a good test. I don't think it's going to be a test, but it's not going to be a gauge. No football teams have gone through what we've gone through, what all the teams have gone through this year. Coaches are really have to take a step back, and players are really going to get to step up. That whole analogy about it's a player's game, well, it's really a player's game this year until you can get 3-4 games in and really know what your team can and can't do so you can help them as coaches. But for a lot of us, we're going to be doing some things and putting some guys out there and waiting to see if they're playing themselves into a spot or out of a spot.
Great. Thanks, Coach.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Christian. Next, we'll go over to Nico and Tommy.
Hey, Coach, how are you?
Nico, Tommy, you guys are going to tag team me, huh?
Double whammy, man. We're coming at you hard right now. Go on first.
Sure, Coach. We were lucky to be able to get a few games in this weekend. Did you watch any? And if you did, did you feel like you were watching a different game, or were you just happy to see the season underway?
You know, traditionally, I don't watch any of that stuff because I'm busy doing other things, but I have to admit that when I walked by the house, walked by the TV, and there were some games on that I did stop and watch 4 or 5 minutes of running play. It was just really cool to see it back on TV, and not only that, to see it executed. Been waiting to hear from the residuals of, you know, from COVID-19, what happened, blah, blah, blah. These games were just played, and I haven't heard anything across the country. I haven't heard the teams blowing up saying that they can't go the next year, and to hear the quietness after the games made me feel just as good as watching and seeing the games on TV.
I hear you there, Coach. And my follow-up is, obviously now that we're in game week, going through everything you guys have gone through, what is the mindset of everybody right now? We know there's new leaders every year, and we've seen it different attitudes, so to speak, from Tommy and Andre in a more leadership sense. So what is their mindset like as you guys get ready for this weekend?
I think the leadership is good. I think they've grown not only on the football field but off the football field. There's been a lot of mature, grown-up topics that they've been handling as young people. And again, I've already mentioned maybe some topics that the older generation should have took care of a long time ago. But to see the young people stretch themselves and really extend themselves out there on the limb and do some of the things they've done, I'm really proud of them. Now, there's some other things that I wish I could be more proud of the older group so they wouldn't have to extend so far out on that limb. But I'm really proud where the leadership is. Again, the crazy thing is that traditionally at this time we may have 4 or 5 more guys that we'd be calling leaders on the team that we'd be recognizing, but with the lack of one-a-day practice as far as getting to know those individuals who are going to be doing the things right on and off the football field, we're gonna have to wait later on the road to make some of those calls. But for our traditional leaders, the guys that we already know in the locker room and on the football field, they've done a really nice job.
Appreciate that, Coach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Darius Joshua.
How you doing, Coach?
Hey, Darius.
My apologies if you were asking before. I wasn't having some trouble getting Zoom up earlier, but UNC obviously had a lot of issues kind of this fall in terms of trying to reopen their school with their students and things like that, and their numbers are nothing like you said that Syracuse numbers are and have been. How comfortable do you feel heading down there, knowing that their campus has had the issues that it's had with COVID-19?
I think the big thing is the protocol that's been passed. I think it's a very, very stringent protocol. I think it's the last part of it is third-party type stuff where you're not going to be able to pull the wool over anybody's eyes and say that a guy is good when he's really bad. So I think when you have third parties looking at a bunch of the stuff that's going on, I think it's going to be a situation where we're going to really find out how good this protocol is. And I really think it's the best protocol that you could have. And I'm not saying that because we have it. I listen to our players. Our players feel good about the protocol. The athletic directors and the coaches feel good about the protocol, and so does the presidents of the the presidents of the universities and chancellors of the universities right now as well. So we're going to put it to the test. We think we've got a fantastic plan like we did when our guys came back June 8th, and we put that plan to the test. And we've had long thoughts and a lot of conversations with guys all across the ACC on this one. So I feel good. I think the team feels comfortable, and we're ready to try it out.
And then just kind of following up with that, obviously this offseason was so different than ones in the past. Having the spring sort of affected it all and then just kind of having the season sort of pushed back, do you feel like the team is where you thought it would be heading into this season in terms of what you saw through practices and some of the scrimmages you had?
Okay, you're going to get mad at me because I'm going to answer you in a foreign language. I'm going to answer you in Spanish. No.
That's what I thought. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Darius.
Thanks, Darius. Next, we'll go to Stephen Bailey.
Dino, we've talked about a handful of different potential players who might be unavailable due to injury or due to opt-out. I assume you know who's in and kind of who's out at this point. Are you willing to share any kind of expected contributors you expect not to have this weekend, either due to injury or due to not playing due to COVID?
Stephen, I appreciate the question. I really do. I even appreciate how the question was asked. All that stuff's going to come out unless it comes out some kind of other way. Once we play the game, I'll be willing to talk about some of that stuff. I just think it's too much of an advantage based off of how practice has been, and practices have been closed down from basically everybody's standpoint, that there's no sense in letting it go. And we're already a big enough underdog, as I've been reading, and I just don't want to give them any other advantage. So if they find out another way, they find out another way, but I'll be willing to talk about it after the first game for sure.
That's understandable. To follow up, I'm assuming that means you're not putting out a depth chart, which would not surprise me. And obviously, going into any season, there's a lot of this coaching strategy, and you try to put in things to surprise the coaches you go against every other year. This year feels a lot different. Like, do you kind of have a feel for how much surprise there's going to be in week one, and does it even feel like more of an unknown going against? I know you obviously don't play Carolina every year, but Pittsburgh in week two, like, is it even that much more? There's that much more uncertainty than on a normal year.
You can get into the surprises, as you say, some of the things that you can do to give yourself a real big advantage. You can do that when you have a fabulous base because you feel so good about the crossing the T's and dotting the I's. I just think it's one of those years where you need to worry about you. You better get your base right, and you're so far behind with spring ball and the things that happen during one-a-days that you really don't have a whole bunch of time to do that special wrinkle that may be able to be something that you can do for a long period of time during the game and have success. I think you need to worry about who you are and then let the ball bounce the way it bounces.
Which is what you would expect a coach to say who's putting in a bunch of wrinkles, right?
That's a good point. Well said.
Thanks, Dino.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we'll go to John Johnson.
Hey, Coach, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Coach, good to see you. So I kind of want to follow up in the area that Darius was going. in the Carolina area, we see they've had some tough numbers and whatnot. But here in Syracuse, you guys have done a really nice job of buying into the protocols and the commitment. What does that say about the football team, where they bought in from day one that this season was more important than "quote unquote" hanging out, and there seems to be an ultimate focus on getting on the field?
This team is built differently than a lot of other teams. This is a private institution. The academics here are no joke. And not only do we want to get the highest quality football player that we can get, but we also want to get young men that are going to graduate at an extremely high rate. And I want to say that we're somewhere around 88 to 90%. I don't know the exact number, but I know it's extremely high. Our guys just come at it a little bit differently. And they really take their time, they do their homework, and they're going to ask you some tough questions. And they're the type of group that you need to answer the questions. They're not one of those type of groups where, hey, this is the way we're going to do it, you do it our way or the highway. We don't recruit cats like that. For the most part, our cats, they ask why, you give them a good answer, they'll go back and digest it with common sense, and then you can rock and roll. But if you can't give them a good answer, they're going to ask more questions. So we're just a little bit different. I think that from the protocol standpoint, I think the state of New York has been at it longer, too. I mean, this thing hit us first. It hit everybody else later. So when our team came on campus, maybe the older generation and the surrounding community had a different attitude about it. I mean, as soon as our guys got back, my phone was blowing up that players are at supermarkets and they don't have a mask. I mean, first of all, people had my telephone number, which is different than a lot of communities. But, I went right back to them and said, hey, there was guys on the team at this supermarket during this time at the meat market buying meat, and they didn't have their mask on. I mean, it was detailed and it was precise. So I just think that the whole community, the chancellor from the top down at the school, and the state of New York, our hearts were at a different place. We got hit by some big numbers, and there was no way in the world we wanted those numbers to go back up again. So I think they came into a family and a community that was going to do it the right way, and they needed to adjust very quickly, especially if they were coming from some of the hot states.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Adam Hillman.
Hey, Coach, how's it going?
Hey, Adam.
So I kind of want to talk about Mikel. I know he's taken a step up this offseason.
I didn't hear the name. Can you start over again?
Mikel.
Okay.
Yeah, so he told us how he's taken a step up this offseason, and now he's kind of taken on a bigger role, especially, with leadership in the linebacker group. What was the biggest difference you noticed when he left campus in March to when he came back in June?
I can't answer your question. You're right. He has been different. He has made a move. All the things you're saying is right. I can't give you the answer of what the biggest difference is. I can tell you that the Zoom call era was something that was very, very unique. And even though the guys are behind in spring ball techniques and that kind of stuff, it really jump-started them on the mental part of it. So I think the players that could really grasp that part of it and not having a coach being right there showing them how to do it, besides having tape on the screen and them being able to talk while the tape is being played, really had a big advantage. And if I had to guess, because I do not know the answer to your question, but if you want to guess, I would guess that Mikel did a fantastic job in those Zoom sessions, and it really gave him a head start, so to speak, once we got back to campus in the practice situation with the one-a-days in August. I hope that's not too long for you, but that would be my answer.
No, that's fine. So I know he wasn't listed as a starter in the spring, and now there's no depth chart, but it seems like he's going to play a key role. What have you seen from him in practice the last few months since you guys came back that's really stood out, that's really said, this guy's going to be a difference maker this year?
He's been very consistent.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Danny Emmerman.
Hey, Dino.
Hey, Dan.
Last week you talked a little bit about the mental health issues and some of the things that young people are going through in this country because of, as you said, like the older generation. I'm wondering how that applies to college athletes specifically and the athletes on your team and what they're going through, especially, in the context of everything that's gone on this summer.
Well, first of all, I'm not going to put my guys personally, their business out there. I just think it's one of those times for your generation is, I mean, looking at your face, I consider you're part of that generation. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, but I'm going to throw you in there too. You guys have just been, to me, you've been dealing with a lot of stuff that mom and dad and grandpa and grandfather should have took care of a long time ago. Uncle and auntie should have took care of that, and you guys didn't have to handle it. And your guys' generation, I think, has been real stand up and to really address some issues that are difficult issues that need to be settled. Okay, we've been around long enough. Guys have gone to the moon a bunch of times. We got all these pictures coming back from space. You know, we've touched Mars. We need to handle Mother Earth and get rid of some of these issues so we can go on about our business as a planet. How about that?
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from there, and I'm definitely part of that generation.
Okay, well, it means I'm not wrong yet today.
Yeah. On a different note, has your, personal deadline for, if players can opt out or opt in, has that passed yet?
I think the big thing is the team needs to know certain things, because the team needs to know, who are they going to have running out of the tunnel with them. And I think for the most part that time's passed. I think that they still have options to do things because there's options for them in fine print, which is law. But from a moral and a spiritual standpoint, they need to let the rest of the family know what's going on, and I think that point has come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next we'll go to Dan Tortora.
Good morning, Coach. How are you?
Good morning.
Just on the other sideline, Mac Brown, just what he's done with North Carolina, coming back for a second stint, and what he did last season, even pushing Clemson. Just what your thoughts are on the coach on the other side, and what you're up against this week.
Well, you're going against a coach that's won a national championship at the University of Texas. Obviously, he had fantastic success at North Carolina the first time, gone to Texas, gone into the, that place where head coaches go when they're at a big job and then they're let go, and then they get to go to ESPN and go to all these practices and meet with all these coaches and see all these different schemes and techniques and find out how many different ways there are to do things. And then they get to come back into coaching. And I think that they're different. I think that knowledge is power. And I think if they're green and growing, not red and rotten, that there should be a change about them. And there's no doubt that when you saw what he did with North Carolina in such a short time, that I think if you asked him, I don't want to speak for him, never would, that there's been some changes. And I think those changes have helped him, obviously at his age, to get along and relate better with the players of these times.
And then on your side, the offensive line, I know you've spoken some praises for them here in the fall. Just what you can say about what you've seen from the offensive line and kind of their makeup, as we're seeing some returning faces, and then other areas where guys are stepping up. Just what you can tell us about the line as you head into the season.
Scrappy, proudful guys. I tell you guys that I like to read everything. If I can get my hands on it, I'm going to read it. I don't think they read much, but I think they have a real feel for what you guys feel they are, and I think they're excited to start a new season to prove you guys wrong.
Thank you, Dino.
Thank you.
Next we'll go to Seth Goldberg.
Hey, Dino. You're playing UNC this week, obviously. They weren't on your schedule like 3 weeks ago. What kind of challenges does that present? Maybe a team that you didn't have to look at super closely until recently.
It is a big challenge. It's a big challenge on both sides. We just played them, and as far as we knew, we weren't going to play them for another 8 or 12 years the way the normal schedule was. So we had put them way behind us in the rearview mirror. And then all of a sudden you had to pop them back up and get ready for them in an opener. So it is different. I will say this, though. You do look at them, you do break them down, but this is one of those years where it's not that you're not looking at your first opponent, especially when you're like 21-point dogs, but you really need to worry about what you're doing and to make sure that your guys have a grip on what you're doing. And in a game like that, it's going to be difficult, obviously. I've seen all the predictions from all you guys on the screen, and I'm not saying you guys are wrong. But I'm just glad that there's always faith, belief without evidence, that every once in a while things happen not the way they're supposed to happen, or mathematically there is a chance. Dumb and Dumber, right? So you're telling me I have a chance? So, we'll see. But I think the big thing is that, our guys are excited about playing a football game, and we're going to go down there and give it our best shot.
And then going off of something that you talked about when Danny asked you the question, what do you think the reaction would be from the guys in the room if you make the trip down to Chapel Hill and, come Sunday or Monday, somebody doesn't feel great about traveling and how it went, and they decide that it just wasn't right for them to keep going with the season?
They all have the option to do that at any time during the season, and that is why that is their option and not ours.
Thanks, Dino.
Thank you.
We'll take two more. We'll start with Jacob Payne.
Hey, Coach, you mentioned earlier about the dynamic attack of that North Carolina offense. If you could only choose one, which would you guys prioritize stopping? Is it that run game or that deep threat passing attack?
The cool thing about football is you never get to say that. I mean, you have to find a way to stop North Carolina, and they have both of those options. So obviously you have to decide what's the most important thing to stop that gives your team the best chance to stay within the 21-point spread. So we're going to choose one. We're going to probably lean on that, and maybe we'll Rolodex it every blue moon to try to keep them off balance. But, they're a good football team. And if you let them do everything, you're probably not going to stop anything. So you better try to take something away.
And how important will it be to get a pass rush against that quarterback?
They've got 4 offensive linemen coming back. You're talking about a person that a lot of people say is the second best quarterback in the conference. And, he's got a big-time arm. He can touch the entire football field. There's no doubt about it. And, one of those future draft choices that are going to come out high, I'm sure. So, he's a good player. We know he's a good player. Would we like to catch him later on in the season? Sure we would. But, we got to deal the cards that were dealt to us, and we're going to open up with those guys and play some other people that we hadn't planned to play. And when you look at the schedule compared to what it was, it's probably the toughest schedule that I've had in the 5 years that I've been here. And I'm not sure anybody's got a tougher road schedule in the country that's playing the first or the second half of the season tougher than ours. If you guys find somebody, let me know.
Thank you so much, Coach.
Thank you.
And last question, we'll go to Corey Spector.
Hey, Coach, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Coach. I'm curious. We haven't really talked much about the wide receiver group, and obviously with Tristan Gahn, it requires a couple of guys to step up. Obviously, Taj and Nykeem at the top of the depth chart, but what can you say about the other guys, including Ed Hendricks and Anthony Quealy?
It's interesting. Those 2 guys that you mentioned have been having a really good camp. Those other guys are really, really close. There's been movement in the lower ranks, so to speak, to see who those next guys are going to get an opportunity to be the guy. And we never know who the guy is going to be. I can't tell you if these guys, the reporters that have been around here, they'll say, oh, we don't have anybody, and then somebody goes for 1,000 yards. And that's kind of how it is. It's an open slate. It's a clean chalkboard every single year. And then whoever wants to write their name up on the board in capital letters can do it. But we've had a good camp. Quealy's had a good camp. Sherrod Johnson's had a fabulous camp. We've had some freshmen that made some moves. Courtney Jackson's had a good camp. We've had the tight ends have done some nice things. I'm going to miss somebody. I apologize if I miss somebody, but it's really been a bunch of guys that have made a move, and then we're going to just see how it goes. And then you got to go in the game and see if they produce the way they have in practice. But we're not disappointed about the group at all. I would say overall that this group's done much better than the group had last year.
On another note, I want to transition to Carolina's defensive side, and you said you're impressed with what Mac Brown has done in just his first year so far, now going into year 2. And one of the things that he did was change Chaz Surratt, their former quarterback, into a linebacker now. And I'm curious what you see on the tape from him and how impressed you are and what he's able to do.
I see a quarterback playing defense that's hard to fool and plays with fantastic effort. And I'll say tackle people. It's not that he doesn't strike people, but the guy just doesn't miss a lot of tackles. If it comes to hitting you really hard, or making the tackle, he's going to make the tackle, although he's had very, very explosive contact with people. It's really impressive to see a quarterback come over there and have that type of impact from a tackling standpoint that early in his career on defense. And then from the mental part of it, you can just see him, whether he's getting a tackle for loss or making an interception, he just thinks like a quarterback. on the defensive side of the ball. A lot similar to Andre Cisco when he's back in our secondary. So guys like that have that offensive mentality on defense, like a Trill Williams, like an Iffy. I mean, those guys are going to make their plays, and there's no doubt he's going to be one of the best players on the field come Saturday.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes today's press conference. Thank you, everyone, for taking your questions, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. See ya. See you guys.